Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Mama We Made It with DJ and Reg. That's DJ. I'm Reg. We're just going to get straight into it today. We are pleased to announce our first formal guest. For people that know this brother, he needs no introduction, but I'm going to run it just a little bit to give you some context. He is probably my favorite dude from Harlem. He is currently the CFO of David Yurman Jeweler in New York. He has been at Ralph Lauren. We met him at Nike. He is a illustrious brother of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, my sans actually. He is a good all-around dude, a funny dude, a former college athlete. The list goes on and on and on. Welcome to the stage, Chris Clipper.
What's up, Clip?
What's up, brothers? Thank you for having me.
I like that sweater.
You know, cable knit.
I like that sweater.
That's how we do. I figured I would dress up for Mama We Made It.
Well, I'm going to start right there, man. So we all grew up in the 80s where there were a whole lot of cliques in high school. You had the jocks, you had the preps. You strike me as a dude that's kind of at the intersection of both. Which way did your clique run in high school?
I refer to myself as Jesus in high school because I walked the earth, right? I walked with your point, the academics, the athletes. I had a pretty eclectic mix of friends. And so I think to this day, that still runs true.
I like that. So let's just set this conversation up, man. Again, brother, thank you for joining us. When DJ and I started this show, we talked about a lot of things, and DJ centered, and I think it has been prescient as we look back on it now, this concept of human flourishing, right? The idea that we're all on a journey, and there's a framework, and I won't get in the way of DJ setting it up. But when we thought about the show, it was really Mama We Made It. We remember being little brothers and sisters in the 70s and all the things that our moms poured into us. And it's about keeping those life lessons as we evolve. And we are now here, some decades later, able to say to our moms, look how far we've come, right? So it's less about any particular career journey or success and more around how can we share what we've seen with the generation behind us, and hopefully there's some application. So in that context, I'm going to turn it over to DJ to kind of kick us off as we talk about this journey of human flourishing and why we wanted to talk to you so bad.
Perfect.
Brother Clip, welcome, man. We really appreciate you joining us. So we talked about it a little bit, man, a few days ago. We've talked about it in the past on some of our golf trips, but all credit to Harvard, Dr. VanderWeele, for prioritizing this concept called human flourishing. And you looked into it a little bit. Said you really respected the formula and the framework. So we don't want to be over formulaic, man, today, but we do want to understand the secret sauce of this man we call Chris Clipper. We do want to do that. We plan to do a little bit of that today, man.
Okay.
In a nutshell, man, human flourishing for our audience, prioritizing and tracking the journey of fulfilling life. And at the hallmark of that, man, is self-actualization. So again, man, as Red said, we can't think of anyone who better epitomizes that. So one of the things I'm curious about, I mean, you kind of said it, I'll say, kind of self-terms yourself a man of the people.
Yeah.
But not everyone can do that. Not everyone can step in and out. In your own words, man, what is it about you? What qualities make you unique and authentic?
That's interesting. I think what makes me unique is that I can flow in different spaces. And that really comes, I think, from my upbringing. I'm an only child. And my parents actually were divorced when I was 5, right? So I was raised by a single mom. My father was in my life, but I was raised by a single mom. And I found myself often a lot of times by myself. And I had to get comfortable in my own skin first. And my mom we used to talk about that quite a bit. You've got to be comfortable in your own skin. When you walk into a room or when you sit down at a table, you have to do it with confidence and be able to move in different spaces. And so that that obviously stuck with me. My father was in the military. I was actually born in Germany, and German was my first language. And so when I came to this country when I was 4, I went to a choir school, and I was
What?
a choir school, Cathedral, St. John the Divine.
Wow.
Right here in Manhattan. So it's a very small school, probably a school of 75 folks between K and 8th grade. But there, I was the only black kid. I was, in lederhosen. And if you think about a black kid, and at the time when I grew up, I had a lot of red hair. I was known as the Black Howdy Doody.
Oh my God.
Right? In lederhosen. Right, and didn't speak a whole lot of English. And so I had to very quickly learn. I was on the outside looking in, but again, parents instilled in me this notion of self-confidence and self-worth. You have to be comfortable moving in those different sorts of spaces. And that happened at a really, really early age. And obviously when I started playing sports, the competitiveness nature came out. But that's where it really started was, way back when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, trying to figure out how to move in different spaces when you're the one that looks different than everyone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
A thousand times. First of all, do you speak German still?
No, I do not. 9. That was not encouraged at Cathedral.
I can only imagine. First of all, we got to get pictures of that. I'm curious, so we've known each other now 15-ish years, maybe a little more, give it plus minus. And it is easy to see how you flow through community. How much of your approach to connecting with people is born in your athletic endeavors? Like, I know that a lot of times when you're a transition coming in from the outside, sports is a space where you can find community that solves a lot of things and breaks down some barriers. For your journey, first of all, give people a little context of your game. I know you got a little handle,
Yeah.
but importantly, what role does that play in terms of how you build relationships?
It's interesting. So my sport growing up was basketball. You was just alluded to in terms of quote unquote having handles. And yes, they were legitimate handles, just for the record. But I'd actually say that was not the the catalyst for me sort of moving between and among different groups and spaces. When I learned to play basketball in Harlem, it was pretty obvious the community in which I was in and who I was flowing with, right? And what I tried to do was meet people where they were, which is another thing again that was sort of instilled in me through my parents, which is, find out what interests the person on the other side of the table. And you may not have an interest in it, but ask questions about it. I asked a lot of questions. And I think people always remark on this for me. I probably listen way more than I speak. Mm-hmm. And that was instilled in me at a very early age, just being interested in what the other person has to say and become a good listener, not just wait to talk. And so it wasn't really sports that did that. Sports, I think, again, sort of basketball, it helped in, growing up in Harlem, uptown. But as I moved in different spaces, I went to schools that were predominantly white. Learning how to talk was probably the hardest thing. Learning how to communicate with folks, especially as I entered, went through college and entered the professional world, learning how to speak and meet people where they were, that became more difficult.
Wow, I'm fascinated by so many things, man, that I didn't know that you just mentioned, Clip. One I want to burrow in a little bit on, man, is you talked about being an only child.
Yeah.
I can relate to that same here. Oftentimes, there's a bad rap bestowed upon us, selfish, self-centered, whatever it may be. You strike me as just the opposite. Mm. So what was it in your journey that you would attribute to that selflessness, et cetera, when, again, you could have internalized and become this person who has no favor for the outside world?
It's interesting. I'm only child, but my mother had 10 brothers and sisters. My father was the oldest of 6, with 2 sets of twins. And most of, I would say substantially all of my cousins were women. And when I grew up, I was sort of, this little sort of boy king and treated a little differently. And by the way, it was interesting because my father was treated the same way, apparently, when he was a young boy. And my feet didn't hit the ground before I was probably 6 or 7. Because when I came to the States, my family was so interested in this black boy who speaks German, who's coming in the heart, like, oh my goodness, this is, the boy king has arrived. Well, I learned humility pretty quickly thereafter. And I think it was learning the humility, right? I come from a really big family. They keep it 100. No matter what successes I had, no matter how I was feeling, right? And I was feeling certainly emboldened, getting some success in sports, getting some success academically. They always kept it really humble, or kept me really humble. And it was really important that I interact with every level of individual. Most of my family was in service, whether it be the military, whether it be as nurses, as EMTs. They were all in service, always in service of something else. And I didn't learn that lesson probably until I was in high school. There's something bigger than yourself. I think I was appropriately tagged an only child with self-centered tendencies for sure, right? And making sure I got the last piece of chicken or the biggest piece of chicken, right? But I learned quickly in high school as I could start to understand that, people are in different economic circles, in different situations. People grew up in different environments. You have to respect it all. And I remember my father telling me when I had my first summer internship as a high schooler, you need to make sure that you are connected with everyone, from the CEO to the first person who mops the floors at the end of the day, and treat everyone the same because your family was in that same space. And so I think it was learning some hard lessons from my parents that really that knocked that sort of selfishness out of me. And so I've tried to think about how could I be more of service. In my feeble thinking, it started with thinking about, well, how can I donate more financially? Yeah. And I think as I've become older, I've realized that the greatest gift I can give is my time. And so that is what's been on my mind most recently as I think about that. But that's really where it came from, is a good dose of humility from my family.
I'm curious, man. We have talked quite a bit on this show about various dimensions of our career journey. And when you look back on your career journey, it's all linear. It makes sense. You can see how the dots connected. But at the beginning, you're trying to figure this stuff out as best you can. When you think about where you are now and how far you've come professionally, what comes to mind?
I'm a big believer in the universe speaks to you. Okay. And I think you need to listen to the universe when it speaks. And I was, when I entered college and I went to Brown University, which, for those who don't know, Brown has this really unique curriculum. They call it the open curriculum, where you can major in anything you want. You can make up your own major, so you can create your own major. You can take every class, pass, fail. It's great for folks that I think want to explore different disciplines. And that's, I think, where I was. I was undisciplined, I think, coming out of high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. As I went through college, there's this affinity for economics and mathematics. I was always good at math. I wanted to know how economies worked. How do folks access capital? And so I ended up majoring in economics. But I ended up going to Bankers Trust, to this management trainee program. And I was selling at the time. I thought, well, just working in a bank will give me that exposure. The reality was I was selling cash management products to institutional clients. I could have been selling pencils. I wasn't learning a skill. And I realized that all of the action was on the other side of the bank. And a very good friend of mine was on the other side of the bank, right? And I would have lunches with him and try to pick his brain about how do companies access capital? What is this corporate finance thing all about? And what he basically said was, look, at the end of the day, you're going to have to go back to school to make that transition. And for me, again, knowing that I wanted to come back to corporate finance, knowing that I wanted to work on Wall Street, I wanted to go as far away from Wall Street as possible and get out of my comfort zone. And so I ended up going to school on the West Coast at Stanford. And that's when I started, I joined Solomon Brothers thereafter and started my investment banking career. What I learned, though, very early on was that that's an incredibly disciplined but incredibly difficult environment in which to work. I was probably working 100 hours a week. And I did that for 7 or 8 years, and at which time, I found myself hospitalized for shingles at age, 29. My second day back in the office was 9/11, right? So again, this is the universe sort of speaking to me. And as I'm running up the West Side Highway, you got a lot of time, or not a lot of time, for introspection, but it's kind of like, if I'm going to go, have I lived the full life? Is this how I want to go? And so the answer was no, right? And I literally resigned the next day and took the next 9 months off. At which point, I got a phone call from a woman I worked with who was head of mergers and acquisitions at AOL Time Warner, and said, we're going to be acquisitive for the next few years. Why don't you come on and join us? Great sign. I was at AOL Time Warner for a good 6 years, rotated through M&A, investor relations, financial planning and analysis, at which point the company came to me and said, our treasurer of 30 years is leaving. Is this a job you'd want? And I'm thinking, this is not the last job I ever want. It's to be treasurer of, a company for the next 30 years. And I didn't know what I was going to do, honestly. But within 2 weeks, I got a phone call from the CFO of Nike who said, we've got a job out here that encompasses everything you've been doing for the last few years. I never interviewed for it. I never cold called for it. It came to me, right? Again, the sign. And then, as I moved back to the West Coast, or to the East Coast, that was really driven for personal reasons. My wife and I both lost our fathers within 6 months. And we were on the West Coast. I'm from New York. My wife's from New Jersey. We figured we've got to get back to the East Coast as soon as possible. Our mothers are aging. And so I left Nike, again, not knowing what I was going to do. Within 2 weeks, got a phone call, iconic, American, founder-led brand, needs a CFO for North America. I'm thinking that was the job I just had at Nike. It turned out it was Ralph Lauren. So I wouldn't say that it was predetermined, but I'm a big believer in, there are signs out there, and that's what I followed. I followed my heart. To some degree, I think I followed passion. And I think the success, any success that I've had has come from that.
Wow, man, what a journey, Clip. I mean, so many things about that are inspiring. One of the things that I think about, when we're in our circles is your quiet wisdom that you carry. And with that comes leadership. When did you start to realize that Clip is a leader and people will follow?
See, I think it starts in sports. It does start there. And I played point guard, which you're a little bit of a floor general. You have to be, right? You've got to direct traffic. I think it started there, but I'll be honest, not a comfortable place for me to sit outside of sports. It's something that I think I've learned and tried to develop over time. I think for me, it was understanding that I have a perspective that's just as valuable as anyone else's in the room. But I've got to make sure that I've got a point of view first. And so as I think about my professional career, I don't like walking into any meeting without having done a fair good amount of work and having a perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think it's very easy to attend meetings. They become sort of these rote, very habitual processes, but I want to add value. And it's the Pareto principle, right? 80-20, right? You want to listen 20% of the time, or, listen 80% of the time and speak 20% of the time. But it's having a perspective. And look, opinions are like assholes, right? Everyone has one. And so I want to make sure that mine, is somewhat thought through and logic. Excuse me?
We don't cuss on this show.
He's not.
You can bleep that out afterwards. But yeah, I think it's just important to have a perspective. I also think in terms of leadership, you've got to lead by example, and talk the talk, walk the walk. And I try to do that. I also care about what the person, again, on the other side of the table is thinking and or feeling.
Sure.
That is so important. For me, listening, not waiting to talk, is really important. But again, when you speak, you better have something to say and it better be worthwhile. And so I think it's really important to have that perspective in advance.
You just said something really a whole lot of things really fascinating. But at the end, you talked about the, really intent on listening and hearing the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
You move in a lot of rooms, as you mentioned, and sometimes perception can precede you, and you can look a certain way to an audience before they get to know you, or more directly, for brothers on the street. They may see you as CFO dude and have one assumption. Cats in the boardroom might see you and have another assumption. How do you manage the game of perception that oftentimes finds its way in the spaces that you're in? Like, cats can see you and read you the wrong way. How do you maneuver those spaces?
Yeah. To me, I handle that very directly with, it's funny you asked that. There's a brother who, the janitor here, David Yurman. We got into a conversation, told him that, I was chatting with someone about going to the boxing match, the Canelo boxing match in Vegas a few weeks back. And this brother interrupts the conversation to say, you know what, I train, I'm a boxer. It's like, I didn't know that. Like, who knew that? And it's funny. I mean, I've walked past this brother for a year, but in the last 3 weeks, we've had more conversation from the same area. It's really about, again, meeting folks where they are. I think I have less issue with connecting with folks of color, even if I'm in a suit and tie. I think, once I open my mouth and have a conversation about where I'm from, what I'm about, that's easier than walking into the boardroom. What's been really interesting for me is as we move to a more casual environment, right? A black man without the suit and tie on walking into a boardroom with a shirt, I can see all the bells going off in everyone's head, right? And so it's one of those things where I'm clear. I want to make really clear very early, I belong in this space.
Yeah.
Right? I've got the experience. If you want to rattle off schools, if you want to rattle off resumes, like I've got all of that. But we're here now, right? Meet me where I am now. But So I think, Reg, to answer your question more directly, I think it's much easier communicating with folks of color because it's just natural. It's ingrained in me. I find it more challenging in a work environment, or I just joined a board a couple of years ago of a publicly traded company, completely different space where I'm now on the other side of the table giving guidance and advice to senior managers, and I've got this baby face. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. But you're also not going to change hearts and minds in that first conversation. And so I just, continue to show up, and be prepared. And I think over time you change hearts and minds. I think that the most problematic part about that is I don't want to be viewed as the exception, right? Well, I know Chris, but he's different. I just want to represent, if that makes sense.
So what I'm trying to figure out now, Clip, is what to call you. Is it Baby Jesus, Baby Face, Renaissance Man, Little Dennis Johnson? Like you got a lot going on, man.
Little King.
Little King, that's right, Little King. Escalator Man, because your feet don't touch the ground. Like, you got a lot going on, bro. But I like it.
Clearly.
We just wrapped our first part of a conversation with our brother Chris Clipper around the journey of human flourishing. Stay tuned for part 2 as we get into purpose, legacy, and the road ahead. Next up on Mama We Made It with DJ and Reg.